depending upon what one counts as a move or even just a temporary situation, just stopping by some people. In the course of my life, and my life means I am now closer to 80 than to 70. When did that happen? In the course of my life, I have moved at least 23 or 24 times, depending upon, what you count. If you count the storage room where I used to have to go and sit for quiet. I've lived in 3 different countries, 2 small islands in the West Indies, but they're independent and they're individual members of the United Nations. And then ultimately here in this country, United States. I've moved around. I dare say some people in here or some people in this congregation have never moved beyond 10 miles from their home. Right? Yeah. So I know a little bit of what it means to be a stranger in a strange land, a sojourner, kind of a pilgrim. You're following the ways of God. And even yes, I know what it is to be an immigrant, an alien. Thankfully, I do not know what it means to be a refugee, type of immigrant coming from wherever they were born and having had to flee. Because that comes with a whole other set of baggage. And in case we had forgotten or couldn't quite connect with it, I'm sure the news has informed us all this week and today what it means to be a refugee. Jesus was at one time a refugee. And even the best of moves, whether you move one time or 100 times, even the best of moves comes with challenges. Sometimes you move because you're moving out of the house and you're getting married. Sometimes you move because you're giving up apartments. Finally, you're able to buy your first home. All good reasons, and yet it comes with a lot of stress and anxiety. Do I have enough money to pay the mortgage? Deciding my life away. Teenagers, some of them are glad to just get out of the house and get into the dorm room. Wow, I can't wait to get away from mama. As soon as they get there, then comes the phone call. Okay? 23, 24 times in my life. But I want to shift because we understand, turn your focus to the Old Testament reading for today from Deuteronomy. God has been with the Israelites. This passage of Deuteronomy, they have crossed over, they have been saved from Pharaoh and crossed the Red Sea and wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. And now in Deuteronomy, the context in which we have this passage is that they are close to what God promised them. A land where they can settle, no longer nomads, a land filled with milk and honey. And we come from the island, and I'm sure from other places around the world to these United States. We have the division, especially a teenager, that was the thing. It's the land, the streets are paved with gold. Yeah. I was shocked that night when we landed in the 60s. There's no gold on the street. So the Israelites are looking forward to, at last, all that wandering in the wilderness and all the ups and downs that you know of that led to Moses having to give the 10 Commandments and a whole bunch of instructions. And this, in today's passage, we continue with God's instruction. And God said, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget to make your offering, your thank offering to God, not just money, but your whole self in thanksgiving to God. But bring a basket of thank offerings, your first offering, and give it to the priest and say these words. And the priest takes the basket from your hand and places it before the Lord your God's altar. Then you should solemnly state before the Lord your God, a wandering Aramean was I. I love those words, that opening phrase. It always sticks in my mind, but I never really focused on it deeply before. But Bishop Rhodes focuses on it in her journey as a Jamaican in England. And how on earth did she get to be a bishop in the Church of England? God alone knows. It was some journey. Makes my 23 journeys nothing. You're to say to the Lord your God, instead of wandering, one translation in the Common English Bible, which is a current, a very highly researched piece of work of the Hebrew text, says instead of wandering, it says starving. I resonate with the word wandering because I envision the Israelites working their way through the desert. This one says, my father was a starving Aramean, and we were starving. And there are times that you come close to not having to eat. Imagine the Ukrainians now fleeing. You know, I saw, first thing I opened my eyes one morning last week, put on the news, and there, a child about not 5 years old, maybe about 4, able to speak. And an interviewer, a reporter, was interviewing this child. Clearly, he was with his mother, and they were fleeing as refugees. And the interviewer is talking with him, and he had such a lovely smile, a cherubic smile on his face. And the reporter kept asking him questions. And in the space of 30 seconds, it wasn't a minute, about half a minute, as the reporter asked him more questions about what he left. And he left Dad. And you saw his face fall. And you saw the tears coming down. This little child. God help the Ukrainian people fleeing today. I miss my dad. Don't know what's going to happen. A 3-4-year-old had to get that, had to suffer. And it brought tears to my eyes because I, to the 4-year-old, was suffering in that way. He learned suffering if he had never learned it before. A wandering Aramean was I. My father was a starving Aramean. He went down to Egypt, living as an immigrant there with few family members. That is where he became a great nation in that foreign land. Remember why they went down into Egypt? They went down into Egypt because they had no food. First, they were very wealthy, and then there was a famine, and then they had no food, and they brought them down over to Egypt and made an arrangement, and then they all went down. Jacob and they all went down, and they were there for generations, and they became wealthy again, and then bad Pharaoh came. Remember that background? That's the background of that story. Maybe your ancestors. My thought is that all of us, not just African, not just Swiss, all of us came here from someplace, unless we are Native American. We came from some other place. Our ancestors came from some other place. Perhaps some of you may not even know who your ancestors were, but you can find that out today. And they ended up here. So this passage resonates. So the Egyptians eventually treated us terribly, oppressing us and forcing hard labor on us. So we cried out for help to the Lord, our ancestors' God, our ancestors' God, your ancestors' God, whatever they went through, how they got from here across, how the West was won. My ancestors, those who made it through Middle Passage, they didn't all make it. Some died before they got to these shores. The Lord heard our call. God saw our misery, our trouble, and our oppression. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, with an awesome power and with signs and wonders. The Lord parted the waters from the waters. May God part the waters from the waters for the Ukrainians today. And how is that going to happen? It's not going to happen magically. Let me offer that prayer. It's going to happen because we do something. And so this morning in the news that there's a group over in Brooklyn that put up a site that people can send stuff, diapers, food, things, and then they have an address and they were taking the stuff that was sent to the airport, putting it on a plane and sending it to a contact in Europe. The Polish people who live on the border near where the refugee crossing is, a few weeks ago, they had no idea that they would have to bear the responsibility to welcome those who managed to flee. So I resonate with this passage, wandering Aramean was I until God may remember how God saved our ancestors and brought us close. And so God says, don't forget, set the produce before the Lord your God, bowing down before the Lord your God, then celebrate all the good things the Lord your God has done for you and your family. It is nice for us to be here in spite of the rain and the cool weather. We come to offer ourselves to God. Why are we offering ourselves? It's not just to feel good, but it's to call to mind. In Lent, we call to mind. We seek to reconcile, to know again. May you know again your ancestors, where you came from, how you got here. This lovely sanctuary, how you were brought up as an Episcopalian in the best church in the world. How we got here. And we feel comfortable, and that's okay. But the instruction calls for us to call it to mind. Don't forget where we came from. And then not just asking, it's not just asking for tithe, money, stewardship. That's fine. Bring your whole self and bring the people of the Ukraine, bring the people of Poland, bring the people of Russia. May God be with them all in that conflict. If not, our turn will come. But that's a political thing, I guess. And when you have finished paying the entire 10th part of your produce on the 3rd year, that is the year for paying the 10th part, you will give it to the Levites. The immigrants, the orphans, and the widows will benefit from it so that they can eat in your cities until they are full. So, on this first day of Lent, I challenge you to go through the 10 commandments that we went through this morning. Pick one that you would like to focus on this week. Go through the gospel. See the temptations that Jesus was tempted by it. There are 3 of them listed in today's gospel. Eat whatever you want. If you're hungry, turn, do magic. No. Jesus says, man shall not live by bread alone. Do not yield to the temptation. Do not yield to the temptation of being so powerful that you have power over the whole world. Jesus said, no. Worship the Lord your God. No. Worship. Do not go up on the temple. Do not go up to the top of the Empire State Building, tallest building, wherever it is, and throw yourself down because you want to prove that God will save you. Don't do that. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. And a whole bunch of other temptations, all about power. You would think that the world would get it by now. I'm so disappointed with countries and nations, and sometimes it's our nation being the aggressor. We're not the aggressor now. We're tempted by power. We're tempted by wealth beyond wealth. We're tempted to hold on and not extend. Yield not. One of the hymns for Lent. Yield not to temptation, for yielding is sin. Each victory will help you some other to win. Fight prayerfully onward, dark passions subdue. Look ever to Jesus, he will carry you through. We'll leave you with a few words from Bishop Rose that sums up and help to inform and shape what I wanted to share with you. She says, there is something both implicit and explicit about naming the issue of what it means to be an immigrant, what Alexander Hamilton went through and what motivated him to be an immigrant, what Manuel that created that play out of the depth of his soul of being a descendant of a type of immigrant. Hamilton, born in the West Indies, mixed race, presumably classified as white, named issues, but always being fully sort of reminded of who he is as an immigrant, and that's a bad thing, and he wanted to rise above it. I encourage you to read the book. You can do it on your own, or you can do it as a group study. You can do it by phone or Zoom. But Bishop Rose goes on to say, naming the issue, implicit and explicit, of how we need to show care for those who are most vulnerable. From the story of Alexander Hamilton, his story in the first song in the play, we can see that he wanted people to know who he was. And what is equally important is that he did not want to sit on the sidelines. We're called to action. Action in Lent. It's not just sit and be quiet. He wanted actively in his new country, these United States, just like your ancestors did. That's why they came here, and mine, and me. That's why I came here with these high hopes. To show we want to be part of this new country. That would also mean being engaged with the challenges of the day. For Alexander Hamilton, the main topics were the Civil War and the enslavement of Africans. He used his gifts of words to encourage others to join the revolutionary movement, to make a difference, to be the change that he wanted to see. I hope that you will use your reflection time in this Lent as a time to be moved to action, not just in Lent, but beyond Lent, and be the change that you want to see. Yield not to the temptation of comfortability, because we're safe in these United States. Yield not to temptation. Amen.